Hi, it's Zareen here from Gift Wellness. Welcome back. Last time I ended at the point where I kind of had the idea about Gift Wellness. If you remember, I was sitting in the airport lounge and having just inaugurated the amazing school, opened this school for orphaned and needy girls in Pakistan, and sitting in the airport lounge in Lahore, and I picked up that magazine and read the article about women in refugee camps and how they had to tear strips off the bottom of their dresses to fold up into makeshift pads. And at that moment I had a vision of me giving pads to these women. And that was the birth of the Gift Wellness journey, really. That was the birth of Gift Wellness. So what happened next was, obviously I got on the plane. On the plane I was making notes the whole journey. I was making notes on the I had newspapers. I didn't have a notebook with me. It was in the other bag with the rest of the baggage, and I was writing notes and ideas about what I needed to do, about researching products that I could sell and also give. So the idea was that I would sell pads and at the same time give pads. So I would sell some, and then with the profits I would get some more pads and give some pads to women who needed them. At that point I wasn't really bothered which pads they were. I was just going to buy pads and sell them. But then what happened was that when I started researching into what sanitary pads, menstrual pads were out there that I could buy, and started looking into the whole issue, I found articles about how toxic they were, and realised there were lots of moments of realisation where I thought, oh, so that's why I felt so rubbish during my time of the month since I was a kid. That's why I get headaches. So that's why I feel so crap during my period. And I realised that it was because of the toxic ingredients that the pads were made from, and they found that they were full of carcinogenics and petrochemicals and plastics, and almost like made of waste materials, like the cheapest stuff that they could find. And because they could afford to, these big companies were, they would make them look clean, make them look like they were good for you, and I felt that was disgusting, really. I felt cheated, because I knew that they made me feel ill every month, and there were members of my family who had endometriosis and polycystic ovaries and all sorts of other problems, and I thought, gosh, I bet if they were using natural products that they wouldn't feel as bad. So I started to look into the ingredients with a view of designing my own pads, and decided that I would bring out my own brand of pads, and that took 18 months of research and development. And alongside that, as well as the products and putting them together and finding a factory that could assemble them for me and so on, alongside that I was also researching the issue around period poverty. At the time it wasn't called period poverty, I just called it supporting women in crisis, because the term period poverty was coined in, I think it was 2017, by Plan International, when they did that report about period poverty in schools. And And so I started researching into it, and I realised that it's not just women in those refugee camps that I read about in the airport in the magazine. It wasn't just women in third world countries and war-torn places. There were women right here under our noses in England who were suffering from period poverty, and I found that totally shocking. You know, there were homeless women. It suddenly hit me, like when I give £1 to a homeless woman on the street, what does she do with it? Does she buy food with it to feed herself because she's hungry? Or if she's on a period, does she buy pads with it? You know, these are things that we don't think about. So it made me really dive into these issues. And of course there were, you know, the food banks that were really starting to pop up, and that issue has become a much bigger issue now. There are more food banks now than there ever were. And then there were women's projects, so women who have been abused, you know, sufferers of domestic violence and so on, who have escaped, and they are in hostels and sheltered accommodation, and also refugees and asylum seekers who have come to this country and are living on they live on like rations. The government give them tokens, and they're living on £5 a day to feed themselves and do everything else that they need to do. And, you know, so how can they possibly afford pads? And again, you know, from my research, I found that there were women who were here in this country having to tear strips off their clothes to use, or use old socks or that sort of thing. And then of course there were the girls in school, and the fact that schools weren't providing menstrual products necessarily, and it's still not mandatory now either. The government is offering it to schools, but it's still not mandatory, and unfortunately only about 40% of schools have taken up the government on this offer, which just doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, I did sort of 18 months of research and development, and started making my connections in the industry. I'd never done business before, so, you know, I came from a charity background and like public sector background. I'd worked with government, and I'd worked in the NSPCC, the children's charity, and at the time that Halimah passed away, I was the chief executive of a national charity that was set up after the 7/7 bombings, and so I'd never done anything like this before, but I had that vision. I knew that I could see myself doing that, so it was a case of sort of reverse engineering from that vision that I had. You know, it was I knew that it was going to happen. It was just kind of technicalities and logistics that needed to be sorted, and I was fine with that, because I had that vision and I could see myself doing it. I just needed to find ways of getting it all together, and so and also my faith played a big part in it, because I put my trust in God, and I knew that, you know, this separation from my daughter is a temporary separation, and in the meantime, that promise that I'd made to her, that pact that we had, that we would do this work, it was my mission to do that work, and that has been my main source of fuel all these years. So yeah, I basically did all the research and development. Took about 18 months doing that, to the point where I'd got the product exactly how I wanted it. I knew what charities I was going to be supporting, what causes I was going to be supporting in relation to women in crisis, and then I just needed the brand. And I was sitting with my sister and we were brainstorming names and just kind of doing mind maps and brainstorming names, talking about the benefits of how it will help women who are sensitive to these harsh chemicals in the ordinary products, and you know, it will help women who use the product, who buy the product, and it will help women who receive the product through our charity donations. And we came up with the word gift because it's a gift on so many levels. It's a gift to those women who use the product. It's a gift to those women who receive the product as a donation. It's a gift to Halimah. What happened to Halimah and that upheaval in my life, and that tragedy and adversity and the pain I suffered, as it turns out, has been a gift in my life, because it's been the thing that's given me so much richness, so much purpose to my life. And what I say to everyone who I meet who has had some form of tragedy or some form of difficulty is, you know, what you need to do is realise that this tragedy, this upheaval, is what is going to make you the best that you can be. So, and what I find is that the harder your test, so the test that I suffered is the worst test that any parent can have, losing a child. But what I find is that the harder your test, the better you will become. And so I'm grateful for my test. And if you think about it, nothing throughout history, nothing great, nothing amazing has ever happened without there first being that real upheaval, that test, that tragedy, that disaster. You know, whether you're talking about slavery in Rosa Parks sitting on that bus, or whether you're talking about let's look at the environment right now. You know, disastrous things are happening, and we need that bad stuff to happen in order to then do something good. You know, look how much good is now coming out of the new innovations and the new projects that are coming out of it because of that. So basically, you know, for this episode, I wanted to just take you on that journey with me of how we developed the products, the brand name, gift, and then in January 2013, my first container arrived of these beauties, and that's what I'll talk to you about next time. So thank you very much again. Do subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.